Into the Storm podcast.
All right, Ken Yance here with Into the Storm podcast. I'm here today with Cody Freeland, and Cody is actually another Bison Tribe member. Back on the board today, we got our boy Brandon. He is working the. If anything messes up with audio video, then that's him. He's right there. I'll post his photo with the episode, so you can find him. And so anyway, Cody, how's it going, brother?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good, man. You just got done teaching a class?
Literally got done at the gym and hopped in the car and drove straight over here.
Good deal, man. Tell everybody what you do.
I am a martial arts instructor. I teach youth martial arts. I teach teens martial arts, and then I teach adults as well. Probably what most people would be most interested in would probably be the fact that I teach mixed martial arts fighters, guys that fight, like in the UFC, Bellator, ONE, different promotions, things of that nature. But what I'm most excited about is working with kids. I really enjoy that side of things. And,
is it because you can beat them up easier?
Yeah, no, it's actually because I think more like them, so my brain probably works closer to like a 7-year-old's than anyone else's. So I think we get along because of that. Right. But the one thing I'll say about the MMA aspect is the MMA aspect, it kind of gives me, it scratches that competitive itch, where the kids aspect really clicks into that fulfillment box. But, there's a little slot of that fulfillment box that is left from the competitive side of me that I still like to scratch every once in a while. And so I currently don't have a mixed martial arts team. I kind of discontinued a while back to focus on my kids. And but I do have a couple athletes I'm working with, and we'll probably be launching a new team starting soon. So that's kind of exciting.
Heck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
So where are you from?
Born and raised Greenville, South Carolina, man. I'm a native.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
How's that worked out for you?
I've traveled a decent amount with MMA, and I've never really found another place I'd rather live, and so I've been very blessed to have been born and raised here. I love where I live. Man, we've been like one of the fastest growing cities in the country for the last like 10 or 15 years running, and we're projected to continue that trend. And so we got a lot of new people that's moved in, but that's helped in a lot of ways. It's made life a little harder in some ways. But the more the merrier in my mind. And so it's been good to be in Greenville. If you've never visited Greenville, South Carolina, it's honestly one of the best places in the world. If you have a family and stuff, if you're looking to party, it might not be the best scene, right. But yeah, I love it here, man. So can't complain.
We're exactly halfway between Charlotte and Atlanta. So like a lot of all the music and sports teams, even if those teams might not be your team, they'll play somebody good every now and then, and you can go watch the good teams come in.
That's how it usually works here.
Yeah, Greenville's on several top 10. I think last year they were on like 17 or 18 national top 10 lists.
It's ridiculous.
Different things. So
it's getting a bit crazy, but I mean it's a good thing because we've somehow managed, and I don't know how, but with as much growth as Greenville's experienced in the last 10 or 15 years, we've still somehow managed to maintain that small town vibe, and we haven't gotten too big. And I've said it forever. It might be because I'm from here, so I might be biased, but I've said it forever. I think the people from Greenville are some of the best people in the world, definitely some of the best people in the country. And as far as terms of like hospitality and just being nice, good people, I feel like we kind of are a little bit slower on things. So we tend to like ask people how they're doing and talk to people. And I just feel like we have a good quality of life in Greenville, and we've been able to maintain that. And I hope that continues. I think that's a big part of it. And the cool thing to see is being here my whole life, I see so many people that move here, and a lot of times when people move into a city, their culture comes with them, and that's fine. We love a lot of different culture and stuff. But the one thing I've personally noticed about Greenville is as people move in, Greenville's kind of rubbed off on them a little bit more than they've rubbed off on Greenville.
That's right.
And so they tend to, if they're from up north, they tend to slow down a little bit and enjoy the finer things. If they're from out West Coast, they tend to chill out a little bit and enjoy some more things. We're obviously not as I would say South Carolina's a little bit more of a laid back state for sure. Right. But Greenville's a good mix of that, to where we have a lot of the new age thought processes and stuff, but we still have a good mix of the conservative, traditional side of things too. So I think it's just a perfect melting pot, and has been for many years. So I like to see that tradition continue.
Right. That's awesome, man. So your childhood, everything, growing up, were you already in mixed martial arts coming up?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I got deemed ADD, ADHD, and I had an older brother he's 5 years older than me. He's like a half brother, but my parents, my dad's always been his father and always been his dad. So, but when it came to like the decision making, when my brother got diagnosed with ADHD, they put him on Ritalin, and my dad didn't really step in. My dad didn't really believe in that side of things, but he didn't want to push the issue. He didn't want to step in, and he kind of let my mom make that decision for the most part. And that's what the doctors were telling her to do. So she did what she was told. And the Ritalin literally made my brother, it calmed him down, but it made him like drool and stuff. Like he just wasn't the same kid. And my dad noticed that. And so 5 years old, I get diagnosed with the same condition in a sense. And like I'm bouncing over the walls. I loved Walker, Texas Ranger. I was like punching my pillows, knocking the stuffing out of them. And so they're like, we got to do something. Well, my dad wasn't interested in he wasn't interested in me taking any form of Ritalin. That wasn't even an option. Right. It wasn't even like, we're not even going to go get diagnosed. It doesn't even matter. We took to Upstate Karate in Simpsonville, owned by a guy named Ray Thompson, who back then was like the only kids martial arts school around. And from the way I remember it, I believe Ray Thompson didn't really even take kids that young yet. I mean, I can't remember. I know as I worked there later, he started taking them as early as 3. But if my memory serves me correct, he was starting kids around 7 or 8 back then, and I was he just turned 6. And he told my dad I'd quit. He's like, this boy's gonna quit. He's too young, And I said, I don't care. I'll sign him up. I'll sign a contract, whatever. He'll keep coming. And I will say this. It was definitely a different world back then.
Stay about this far.
There we go.
Yeah,
it was
right there.
It was definitely a different world back then, in the way of training. Mr. Thompson was definitely a little bit more hardcore, but I learned really quick how to stand still. I learned really quick how to listen, and I learned really quick how to make sure I knew where the instructor was on the mat at all times. And so I joke all the time, but I tell people, enough fear will take a kid's conditions away in a lot of ways, and that's kind of not the way we do things anymore, in a sense. But that's kind of how I got started. And so I remember at 6 years old, I'd been doing martial arts for a while, and I looked at my dad and mom and I said, I'm going to be a karate instructor when I get older. And they said, oh yeah. I said, no, this is what I'm going to do. I'll never quit. And I never did. I literally started martial arts at that age. I stuck through it all the way through high school. When I went to college, I came home. I would come home and go to my karate school before I would go to my house, And I want to preface this with something too, because people hear me say karate school, right? Like, look, I know when you say karate it's like a laughing stock of the martial arts world, because it gets mixed up with some like schools that are really after school daycares that just have kids punch and kick. And I want to preface with this fact: the karate school I went to was a real martial arts school. Right. So I don't want to laugh at like they put out multiple world champions in kickboxing. Obviously, Stephen the Wonderboy Thompson grew up there. His dad owns the school. He's one of the top 10 fighters in the welterweight division in the UFC for, what was it, 10 years, like a decade. Yep. So I want to make sure when I say this, I'm not putting out the idea that I was going out and doing this new age karate. We were training, and we trained pretty seriously. And so I did that all the way through basically high school, came back from college, would train. And when I got out of college, I instantly went back to teaching karate. And from there branched off and kind of started doing my own things business wise and stuff. But yeah, man, it was, it's the one thing in my life that's other than, obviously I've been a Christian since a little boy, but other than religion, like martial arts has been the one thing in my life that's always been around, like forever. Right. So.
And how do you feel like it's served you, the rest of your life? I mean, it seems like everyone I know that's involved with MMA, any type of, branch of that, like Muay Thai, any discipline, choose a discipline. But now it seems like it's way more people are just blending them all together.
Yep.
Like it's hard to find people that are just this or just that anymore. But how do you feel like that's served you in other aspects of your life? Just because it seems like everybody who's involved with that just has a certain level of discipline and just self-control that seems like it would just feed over into other parts of their life a lot. Do you find that with your students and yourself?
Yeah, man. I always say that I think martial arts is a perfect metaphor for life. I think that anything that you could go through in life, you can go through on the mats, and it's just in a micro scenario, micro environment. And so, brief example of that. If you get in a bad spot in life, right? Something happens to you, you're in a bad spot, you get angry, right? The tendency to what you want to do is you want to react right away, and you want to just do something. And you learn really quickly in martial arts that's the exact wrong thing to do. Like unless you have a trained response, that emotion's not going to help you in that situation. And even if you do, a lot of times the emotion's not going to help you. But you're definitely not going to have a clear thought in that emotional response. And so usually in martial arts, when you just react, that's when bad things happen. That's when the trouble happens. And so that's a scenario right away. It's like, hey, you got to control yourself. We could go into that deeper. If you looked at the scenario of like getting yourself in a bad spot, when you get yourself in a deep spot against a really good martial artist, let's say in jiu-jitsu, some guys around your neck, that's a really bad spot. And the only way to get out of that is a sequence of well-timed, correct movements that you execute without fail. And that's hard to do. You kind of have to know all the right steps, and it's never just one thing. And I think that's a good scenario. I talk to people who, maybe have been dealing with addiction or things. And I tell people, I say, look, it's kind of the same scenario. Someone's got their arm around your neck. And if you think that you're going to do one thing and get out of it, you're wrong. Right. You're going to have to do a series of things that are tough and they're hard. And you're going to have to do them at the right time. And you're going to have to stay focused on it. And if you miss a step, you're going to have to go back and do it again. And that's part of the journey. And that's the same way in martial arts. Like martial arts, I think the best way to wrap up martial arts is it teaches you that it doesn't matter what you know. You take a guy who understands a lot of different moves. If he can't do any of them, it doesn't matter. You take a guy who only understands one move. He can beat everybody in the gym if he can do that one move to him. So I see that in a lot of aspects of life, where I see a lot of people who are really good at one thing, and they've learned that, hey, if I just do this one thing, I'm going to be successful in the external world, right? And to me, those are what I would consider competitors, right? I think that a true martial artist is someone that wants to see the whole picture, and that's kind of the same thing in life. I think that there's a lot of people who get really good at making money, And so they dive in wholeheartedly on making money. And because they focus on that one thing, they have success with it. And they can, get an advantage over people or be successful in that realm. I know some people that are that way with their family, where they dive all in with their family, but at the same time, maybe they neglect the financial side of things, or they neglect themselves. There's people in the other that dive in wholeheartedly on themselves, physical fitness or mental preparation. And usually if the people who are diving in on themselves have the best chance, because if they're doing that, they're going to try and be the best father, be the best professional, be the best in shape they can be. They're going to try to be the best version of themselves. But a lot of times people aren't looking at the whole picture, and so that there is another metaphor, right? That martial arts should be something that allows you to discover new things and live in a new unknown situation while being vulnerable. And that's the hardest thing that people have to get through in life, is growth really only happens through vulnerability.
Right.
And a lot of people disagree when I say that, but it's like, how many people I know that think they could choke me out? You know how people I know that think they could just go in and out grapple some guy on TV? They have no clue. And it's blissful because they don't know. But like the moment they go to the mat, they realize, oh man, right, that's not necessarily real. And so I think that martial arts is one of those aspects that shows you, it's like, hey, there's two sides to this life. There's the side of the knowledge of what you need to do. Then there's the physical doing what you need to do. And then you have that fun little intersection of, okay, well, this is what I actually do. This is what I should do. And this is the scenario where I'm not doing those things, where I'm doing what I don't want to do, but I know better. And that's where our free will comes into, like, reprogram ourselves, and either you consciously put yourself in an environment where you're vulnerable that will force you to reprogram yourself, or usually you reprogram yourself in a way that you think you know what you're doing, but if you ever got put in that situation, you wouldn't, right? Like a perfect scenario would be learning a new language. A lot of people go through high school or college, they learn a language in a class and they think they're ready to go, and then you drop that person off in the middle of that country and they don't know as much as they think they do. Now, that being said, 2 weeks later, a week later, 2 days later, all of a sudden they've learned so much because they put themselves in an environment where they were truly vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And because of that, their brain said, hey, I've got to evolve. I've got to adapt. The number one thing people want to avoid in life is being vulnerable, because their ego tells them, hey, that doesn't feel right. You're vulnerable here. This could kill you. Right? And so they avoid it. But that's the trap. That's the trap, because that's the place that you get best. When I'm rolling with somebody, like, I can get better at attacks against like a low level guy, like a blue belt, white belt, purple belt. I can get better at my attacks, but I don't ever truly get better at jiu-jitsu until I'm going with a guy that can beat me. Until I'm going with a guy that if I slip up a little bit, he's on my neck. And if I'm not giving him all my attention, he's going to beat me. But that vulnerability, going with somebody that can beat me, is what makes you better, and it's also the one thing I want to avoid. When I look over and there's a high level purple belt competitor or just an old school black belt, and then there's like a blue belt hobbyist, and they're both looking at me, dude, I want to go with the blue belt hobbyist. I do, because he's going to I'm going to be able to do my moves against him. He's going to be like, whoa and wow. And, and it's going to feel really good in the moment.
It doesn't level you up.
It doesn't level me up. The guys that I look at and I go, oh, roll with them. Right. The moment I have that thought, it's like I have to have a trained response of like, all right, that's the guy. Because the only way I'm ever going to not feel that way about him is to roll with him so many times to where eventually he doesn't bother me anymore, And so I think that's a big principle of martial arts, is teaching you to, as silly as it is, as cliche as it is on this show, it teaches you to run into the storm. It teaches you that the quickest way to get good is to find the storm and sit in it long enough until you figure out how to build a shelter, stay dry, have a party with your friends, and dance in the rain and have fun with it. Like, and then once you're in there, all of a sudden it's not a storm anymore. It's just fun, and it's just an event that you get to enjoy. And I forget the quote it is, but it's like something about the prettiest views are always right after the storms.
Right.
And part of that's because nobody else is out there looking at the views, right? There's only so many people that were sitting in that storm that were there when it cleared up, that got that clear, fresh view of the sun coming through and everything settling. And not many people will ever get that view because they're not willing to sit in the storm,
I was listening to Rogan talk about MMA a lot, UFC, and one of the things that he didn't put in exactly these words, but I was explaining to someone why I enjoyed MMA so much, and I think that it's kind of like, I like chess. I don't know if you play chess, but like I learned to play chess at one time, and the crazy thing about this chess story, how I learned how to play chess, is I was working at this this place where they cut down persimmon trees and made golf heads, like way back when they had wooden golf clubs, right? And so we put like 40 blocks into a big bag and shipped them back to Japan, where they shaved them down and made golf clubs. Well, everything in that whole room, that whole warehouse was like saws. They had these huge, massive saws, and you had to wear earplugs. I mean, there's like 20 different types of saws going off at the same time. So, but on break, and it's all these tatted up guys, man. They all rode Harleys to work, and some of them were missing fingers because if you work there more than 3 years, you're missing something.
Yeah.
Right? And then you'd have your breaks. Like, it was just like the horn go off, you go and the lights would come on, like show you this is break time. And you go in the break room, and there's like, I couldn't believe this, but I went in there, there's like 5 chessboards set up. And you go in there, and guys would just get their snacks and just complete silence. Like, they would just be playing chess. And one chess game might go on for 3 weeks because they only played on their breaks. And it's like, you're walking there, these guys have ponytails on their butt, they're completely tatted up, and barely said a word. They just sat there and playing chess all the time. Like, I couldn't believe, like, you would think they're just raising hell and, talking about women and doing all this, like, just the most chill dudes, man. And just having conversations with those guys or whatever. But going back to the MMA thing, it's like, imagine like having to push yourself like what you would do in like a Ironman contest, like Ironman run or whatever. But then have to have the concentration that you have climbing Mount Everest, right? Because one slip and you're done. But then also, while you're doing both of those things simultaneously, you're also playing chess. Like, that's literally what's going on, in those situations. So you're testing every possible thing. So,
yeah. I would definitely say it's like chess, but I would equate it to more like speed chess, because a lot of people think that when you're in there, you're calculating, you're doing all this. Most of those guys that are playing chess, like, the way they've studied and the way they've learned is they've put themselves in this scenario so many times that they already know the right move before the move happens. Right. They just know it. And so when you watch these speed chess guys, boom, 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 they're just going so fast, they're not really thinking, they're just reacting. And that would be more like a fight. And so the hard thing about a fight, the hard thing about anything that you learn, right, is you have to go through those levels of competency, to where the first level, I think if you don't know the levels of competency, there's 4 levels. There's unconscious incompetency, there's conscious incompetency, there's conscious competency, and then there's unconscious competency. And some people call it the rule of 10,000 hours to get to that level. But essentially, unconscious incompetency is that you don't even know that you're bad at what you're bad at. Okay,
that's the best place to be.
That's the best. That's ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss. Right. Then you have conscious incompetency. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm not as good as I thought. I'm actually not very good at all. And then you start training, and you become consciously competent, where it's like, oh, you know what? If I think about this, I can do this. I can actually do this. And then if you stay in that zone long enough, and you do those things, those right answers long enough, eventually you become unconsciously competent, where, you don't have to think, you just do. In the martial arts world, my gym, I have a boxing coach. His name's Chris, and it's funny because he'll just randomly try to sneak me. Just come up and try to like grab my neck. And every time he does, like I don't know he's coming. I don't feel it. It's not that I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna get. But the moment his hand hits right here, like I just instinctively, my chin tucks, my hand come up, and I instantly attack his grip. And he's like, dude, how do you always know? I'm like, I don't. But I've been in that scenario so many times that the moment the moment I feel anything coming towards my neck, like I respond instantly. And so that's an unconscious competency. And so
this like the Pink Panther when he used to have this guy would attack. Remember what was that? What was his name? Kano, or what was the guy's name that attacked?
I don't remember the names. I think I know what you're talking about. Where
he would just be walking around his mansion or whatever, and the guy would just jump out and attack him. And they would just have a full on damn fight in the middle of the mansion
to make him practice.
Yeah,
make sure he was ready. Yeah. But yeah, so I use that example in MMA, like those levels. Is the first level is you have the guy that walks in who's like, I'm about to destroy this old guy over here with a dad bod, or I'm about to destroy this young kid over here that weighs 135 pounds. There's no way this martial arts stuff works. And then 2 minutes later, they're dying, and all of a sudden, that's like the shortest lived. It depends. That's the longest lived scenario that people live in up until they try something, and then it's the shortest lived. And so that's that vulnerability is the moment you say, hey, I'm going to go do martial arts or jiu-jitsu. You can no longer say, oh, that would be easy.
Right.
Well, we're going to find out, right? And so that's that first vulnerability, and you go, oh, I'm not good. I just got destroyed by some 125-pound blonde-haired girl. She just choked the life out of me. Like, this is embarrassing. So now that next step of conscious incompetency is like, well, now you know. Now you know you're not good. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to avoid it and just be like, oh, that's not for me?
Right.
That's what a lot of people do who's or what I would consider in a fixed mindset. They're like, oh, I'm not good at this. I wasn't born good at this. Okay, well, if you believe that you were born with your God-given talents, like you're kind of screwed. If you're not good at something, you shouldn't do it because you don't believe you're going to get better. But I believe you should have a growth mindset. Right. And so growth mindset of people are like, you know what? I'm going to come in and train. I'm going to come figure this out. And so they learn all the moves to the point where they don't know any tricks anymore. I can't just trick you with a move and get you. And that's where you get that first belt in jiu-jitsu is blue belt.
Right.
Where all of a sudden you're consciously competent. You have skills enough now to where if you recognize what's about to happen to you, you know what's coming and you can consciously beat it. Coincidentally, this is the number one place people quit in jiu-jitsu. They get their blue belt, they realize they've kind of been exposed to a majority of the moves, about 80% of the art itself. And they realize for that next 20%, they've got to put in another 8 years. They just put in 2 years to get their first belt, and they've been exposed to 80% of the art. They already feel like they consciously understand the art.
My guy Theo Vaughn, you know Theo?
Mm-hmm.
He said he's a 3rd-degree white belt now. He just moved out of the girls' kindergarten class. Like they just moved him out of elementary, the girls' class. So he's moving up, man.
Yeah.
And
he's got his 3rd stripe. Yeah, it's a tough spot though, because literally, if you look, like, it's a joke about how like when people get their blue belts, they turn into a ghost, and it's because you realize you get that outside, you get that external validation, like, oh, I've gotten better. Mm-hmm. And then it clicks.
But do you think a lot of people, it's like you have a life of experiences. Like for me, like I played a lot of sports. I got good at a lot of sports. Golf was the last thing that I kind of took on. Like I was 30 years old and I really didn't even think it was a sport. I was like, dude, that's like an outside billiard. It's because you can't play defense. You can't talk shit. It's just a game, right? And then I played it, and then I was so bad at it. Like it was just, my God, it was. Then it became addictive.
Yeah. And
then I got to where I was like a 5-6 handicap, and it's like, okay, I could keep playing to get way better, but then it's like okay, I pretty much figured out that I could do this. I wanted to. You just get to a level where you're competent at it, and then but it's not your life. Like I have other stuff to do.
Yeah.
Right? So do you think that's what it is, or do you think it's more just people like just they don't believe in themselves enough to keep doing it, or they just wanted to hit that level of competency and then just check out?
I think for a lot of people, they got an external goal and they got that dopamine release, and now to get the next one, it's it's deep work, and I think, and depending on what your goal is, right? Like I think there's a book, 80-20 rule or something. And it basically states that you can get about 80% of a skill set by putting in about 20% of the time it takes to get 100% good at it. So like, for instance, if something took 100 days for me to master, I can get about 80% of that skill if I just put in 20 days of work. For me to get the other 20%, though, I've got to put another 80 days in, because that last 20% jump is just the law of percentages. It takes so much more time to get those last pieces in place. So I think that could be a situation where people get to a certain level of competency and they're like, hey, I got this figured out. The problem with that is it doesn't work that way. That's a fallacy, right? And so I've told people for years, like, if I ever open my own gym, it's going to be different than any other martial arts. And a lot of people probably will hate me for it. But to me, if someone asks me what a black belt is, well, a black belt in jiu-jitsu or a black belt in martial arts, to me, if you're talking about what they are in the present moment, it's somebody that trains 3 to 5 times a week in martial arts consistently. No matter what, they show up and they train. That to me is a black belt. And the reason I say that's a black belt is because if you give me somebody who is constantly doing that for a long enough period of time, they will be a black belt. And on top of that, if you look at a skill set scenario, if you give me somebody who trains 3 to 5 times a week, but's only been training for 2 years, 3 years, and you give me somebody who trained 3 to 5 times a week for 8, 9, 10 years, but hasn't trained that many times a week in a year, hasn't done anything in a year. The person's only got 2 or 3 years experience, that's training consistently every single day. We'll submit the guy who's got 10 years experience, right? And so, like, for me, I'll use me as an example. I don't train like I used to. I don't train like an athlete. I'm not training 2 times a day, 5 days a week. Like, I might train once or twice a week. I'm in classes constantly teaching. I'm constantly studying the art. I'm constantly watching videos and breaking things down and updating my software. But as far as like training my hardware, like, I might train that once a week, twice a week sometimes. Like, it's not nearly the same. Sometimes I might go a week or 2 without training at all. So if you give me a guy who's a high-level blue belt, a competitive purple belt that's training 4 or 5 times a week, that's in shape, that dude's probably going to submit me. Will I know exactly what he's doing when he does it? Sure. Can I stop it? Depending on how tired I am, maybe not. And so that's the fallacy. And so I see these people that come to me and they're like, oh, I want to learn self-defense. You really want to learn self-defense? Well, unless you know the specific date when you're going to get attacked, you better train every day, because it doesn't matter how good you get at it. If you don't do it consistently, you're going to not have it when you need it. Like, you probably shoot guns. Guys that shoot guns, when you first get your gun, you got to go to the range every like 2 or 3 times a week, and you got to dial it in. And after you do that for a couple years, well, now you go in there and like you're hitting all your targets, your speed draw, and your reload, and like you have all your things down, right? Well, now that you've put all that time in, you might only need to go once a week to maintain that level of accuracy. And if you do that long enough, maybe you only need to go once a month. But if you stop altogether, the skill set will fade. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so in a martial arts scenario, you can't afford to not have that muscle memory be instant, and that, again, is another one of those metaphors for life. There's certain things that, like, hey, you want to learn how to be a good dad? Cool. But that's not something you can do for 2 years and then say, oh, I've acquired this skill. It's like, that doesn't matter. If you slip up 1 year of that kid's life, it could be the year that would have changed their life. It could have been what developed their issues down the road.
Not only that, but it's also, when it comes to kids, it's such an evolution, because the kid changes so quickly. Their needs change quickly. The lessons that you have to instill in them change periodically, from, like, you got 3-year-olds that they're doing a certain thing, and then then 7-year-olds, and then you hit middle school, that's a whole nother, and then high school, and then college. I mean, it's just like every phase. So it's not even like with one kid you can even figure it out, because it's like, I've got, my boys are now 35, 31, and my daughter's 17. And it was just, I mean, having a daughter threw a monkey wrench in there, because like I'd already raised two boys. So a third boy, I probably would have pretty much had it figured out, right? But then there was a little girl. It's like, damn, that's my first one of them. So it's just been a whole nother damn can of worms. But it's just such a process of learning, and let me ask you this, talking about parenting. How would you feel, we had conversations before and talked about parenting, and your style of parenting, what you brought from your childhood, and how mixed martial arts and disciplines there, and how you apply. And you really had a couple of really cool stories, about, being patient. And, I remember you said something about your son had spilt a drink in the car. So
Yeah.
you want to share a little bit of that? I thought that was a really cool story.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing about parenting is meeting the child where they're at, like what you were talking about, is understanding they're gonna have different needs at different times. But I think a fundamental flaw in a lot of parents' approach is they're doing everything for the now. Like, hey, we gotta go right now. We've got to do this right now. We've got to get this thing to be this way right now. And they're focusing on the results of the actions. And when you do that with a kid, I don't want to say almost always, but a lot of times you're going to be disappointed, because the results that they're going to give you aren't always going to be good. And then when you get a result you don't like and you're disappointed because of it, well, now even if they fix it, it's for your approval, not for the simple fact of doing it right. And so the story you were talking about with my son, we were running the gym, we were late, and we weren't quite late yet. We were running to be on time, but he spills his drink. And in the moment, man, I was a little angry. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, dude, what are you doing? But it clicked to me that, like, this is one of those choices I have. I can either teach my son that, hey, stuff happens, and look, we got to clean it up. We still got to do the right thing. And sometimes we're going to be late because of that. And take a moment to say, hey, okay, why did this happen? Okay, it happened because you were running, you didn't put your lid on your drink, you weren't staying focused. Okay, well, what can we do next time? We'll make sure I put my lid on. I got to slow down.
Tippy cup.
Yeah.
Tippy cup.
like how do we fix this? And so now he gets my help, he gets my attention, I clean it up, I'm there for him when he needs it. He learns a lesson. And yeah, we're a few minutes late, but you know what? Like, it is what it is.
Right.
Life goes on. And I think that's another thing. And I read a quote that said, the only people that will remember that you worked late 20 years from now is your kids. And that made me think, like, man, really, in this life, whose opinion of me matters most? Like, well, God's, mine, but outside of that, whose opinion of me matters most? My children. They're going to be the ones that are going to be trying to take care of me when I'm dying. They're the ones that are going to carry on my family legacy and my name. And they're also the ones that are going to be and this is a crazy thought. They're the ones that are going to be raising my grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of grandparents whose children raise their grandkids the exact same way they raised them, and the grandparents hate it. Mm-hmm. They can't stand it because they see themselves raising. They're like, man, I did that same thing, and like you're gonna look back and you're just gonna realize those things don't matter, and I've seen enough of those scenarios where I realize, like, hey, bro, you whatever you do, however you react, not what you tell them. Kids don't care about what you say. They only care what you do. And whatever I do in these moments is not only going to mold how my kid feels about him, how he feels that I feel about him, but also how he interacts with my future family, with his kids one day. Right. And so it's just seeing that your actions really are that important to a few people in your life. Not to everybody, but there's a few people in your life that you are legitimately programming, teaching this is how we react in these scenarios. And when you really dive into the subconscious mind and when it's formed and how powerful it is, I just feel like if parents were truly educated on the importance of birth to 7, like it would be one of the most focused upon things in parenting. Like the amount of focus people would put an emphasis they would put on their kids from birth to 7, I think would change overnight if more and more parents understood how important that time frame is. So for me, it's right now it's the glory days. Birth to 7's like he's king. They're kings. I don't think I have my wife Hannah and my 2 kids. Julian's 5 and Barrett. I call him Bear. He's 1. But if you're not familiar with it, my parenting tactic is I think it comes from the Samaritans. I think it's where it came from. But essentially, they did birth to 5 was one way of living, 5 to 10 was another way of living, and then 10 to 15. I've extended that out. I say it's birth to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21 is the time frames. But what they would do is the first stage of a child's life was they were considered a king or queen. And it's because they understood that was a time that their subconscious mind was being formed. Their brain is in theta state. And everything that they're interacting with is essentially programming them as to how the world treats them, their place in the world, and how they're supposed to respond to it. And so the Samaritans wanted their children to feel like kings and queens as an identity, as their own right. But at 7, now my son's kingdom gets overran. My son's kingdom now gets taken over by a tyrant king, his father, me, and a tyrant king, his wife, my wife, the queen. And so now from 7 to 14, like he's essentially, I don't like this word, but it's the best word. He's essentially a slave to me, right? He doesn't get a choice in things. I choose what he eats. I choose where he goes. I choose what time he goes to bed. I run his life. He becomes a servant to me and my family. Like you get chores, you become and get responsibilities. I don't care if it was your fault or not. You're going to fix it. And so now, even though his identity lies as a king or queen, whatever, boy or girl, now he starts to build habits. He starts to build these conscious habits because birth to 7 is all about subconscious. It's all about how you feel. It's all about these processes. At 7, that's their conscious process. And so we start becoming conscious aware of like, hey, this is what we need to do. And so from 7 to 14, he learns how to become a servant and he learns how to serve others, whether it's his job or not, whether it was his fault or not, doesn't matter. Serve. 14 though, that's when he's earned his right to be part of the tribe. He's spent 7 years of following the rules of doing what mom and dad say. And now I want to build his decision-making skills up because I've seen too many adults that maybe even love themselves and love other people, but when it comes to making a decision, they just can't. They don't trust that aspect of their brain. And so from 14 to 21, this is the time they get to make decisions for the tribe. Like, where do you want to go to vacation this year? What's some things you guys want on the menu for this week? What's some things you want around the house? Where do you want to work? Like, I'm going to start literally putting decision making on them now because that's another skill set that I want them to have. And so for me right now, both my kids are kings. It's just great. Right. Like I want to treat them like kings. Like I don't care if my kid cries in the middle of the night. Like it's frustrating, but dude, I love being able to get up and run in there and cuddle them. I don't think I'm going to like the next stage for him. I don't think I'm going to like being the disciplinarian all the time. I understand it's necessary and I don't mind being it. I think as a father that becomes, I don't want to say the burden, but it becomes the harder side of parenting,
Sure. And I'll tell you my younger son just came to me. He's 31 years old. We just had this conversation 2 months ago, maybe, and said that now he sees, why there was so much discipline. Like it took him that long. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it's just like he understands now because he teaches, and coaches high school. And so between the sports and being in the classroom and everything, he sees where there's a gap. There's a terrible gap. Like you're saying that these kids are, kings or queens. Hell, these days they're telling you that, Dad, I don't want to be a king. I want to be a queen. So, like, that is a tough world out there, brother.
I'll say that's a sensitive subject for like. I obviously am very traditional. I believe in God's creation. I believe that I believe in traditional aspects of things, and so I believe in boys and girls and that fun side. But I keep looking at these things, and when I think about the proponent of like kids growing up, one of my favorite quotes is environment stronger than willpower. Okay, and so because I understand the subconscious mind to an extent, the subconscious mind makes, let's call it 95% of your thoughts and decisions every day, right? They're pre-programmed in your mind. We think these programs are thoughts, but they're just programs, right? They're not actually free thoughts that we're having in the moment. They're just a response to a stimulus. So if they're a response to a stimulus, what controls the actions of the subconscious mind? What creates those responses? The environment that you put yourself in. Right. And so to me, I feel like the number one thing that the most important thing for a child is the environment at which they grow up in. And so as a parent, I think the issue, what I've seen personally in the past, generation, if you will, is too many parents have created a isolated, safe environment that their kid doesn't necessarily get a lot of attention in and doesn't have to work for attention. And so they seek things to give them dopamine responses, usually on the internet. Right. And that's a disaster because now you're letting the base program of a human being program itself through desires. That's not a good recipe, And so a part of me thinks that there's a lot that goes into it, but I really believe that the environment in which kids grow up in is the flaw in, because if you take and you, I can show you some children who have a really, really good head on them shoulders and can think for themselves, make good decisions for themselves. And the environment that they grew up in wasn't all hunky-dory. Mm-hmm. And then I can show you a kid that's grown up in an environment, it's essentially a maximum security prison for their own sake. They're not exposed to any bad scenarios. They get anything they want, and man, they can't do much with themselves. Right. And they're and so I've said this before, the job of a parent is that we get to suffer for our children. And I say suffer because suffer is the opposite side of love, right? You can't suffer about something unless you have an emotional attachment to it, unless you love it. And so we have these children that we love so much that we have to watch them grow. We have to watch them experience things. And the greatest feeling in the world is when my kid can accomplish something they couldn't previously. The scariest thing in the world is watching them go through that process. Right. Bought my kid a jungle gym. We bought it a little early. We got it from when he was like 3. Probably should have waited until he's 5. But, I remember when he's like 4.5. And it was the first time that he climbed the top of that thing by himself. And it was just like, oh my gosh, dude, you did it. You did it. Now, I also remember from 3 to 4, my wife wouldn't go in my backyard with him because he would climb up there and he would get up there and get scared and fall off. And that was one of the times that we kind of discovered this tactic, in a sense, where he had kind of gotten up to the middle and he got himself stuck and he was screaming, "Mom, Mom," and Hannah's like, "Hey, be careful. Hey, stay right there." And I said, "Wait a second. What are we doing?" And I'm sorry, he was up in the middle and she came out and she was like, "Oh my God, he's climbing this thing. Hey, be careful." And I said, whoa. He's fine. Are you calling him down to stop him from suffering? or are you calling him down to stop the suffering you're going through currently? Because it's scary to watch your number one love up there that he could fall and he could get hurt. But that's the payoff of being a parent. That's the job that we get to do. We get to sit here and say, I love this kid so much that I'm willing to suffer watching him struggle through these moments to be there during the triumph of him getting through it. And I think that's personally, for me, that's the hardest part. The hardest part's watching my kid fail and not walking over there and doing it for him and being like, bro, you can do this. I got you. Right. That's the thing, right? That's the trick is you really learn as a parent, you cannot do anything to help somebody else. The only best thing you can do to help somebody else is to be the best version of yourself. Because the moment you start trying to step in and always fix the situation, you're hindering that person. Mm-hmm. You're hindering them. And the moment you really understand that is usually when you're a parent, because you see I'm going to open this bottle for you. Oh, I'm going to open this. But now you have a 7-year-old that can't open a bottle. Mm-hmm. And then you go to somebody's friend's house and your 7-year-old comes up and is like, hey, Dad, will you open this? And their 3-year-olds open it and they look at you and you're like, wait a second, what have I done? And I think that's the hardest part of the human condition is we see so many things that we know how to fix in other people. And then we want to fix them in other people. But the weird thing is the things that you usually have the most solutions to are the problems in your life that you haven't yet fixed. Because you've gone through all the scenarios of how to fix them and you know how to fix them, yet you don't feel as if you deserve to fix them yet. So you continue running down that rabbit hole of feeling like yourself, even though you know the solutions of how to not be yourself. And that's that subconscious mind that I'm talking about from birth to 7. Those people that you can't get out of your own way. It's because you're addicted to this feeling of who you are. And that person usually was programmed from birth to 7 and you didn't really have much to do with it. And the healing process of that for me is the moment you realize you didn't have much to do with that. So however you feel about yourself, like inherently, has nothing to do with you. It's everything to do with the people around you when you were growing up. And so that's the first step of realizing that, forgiving yourself and going, you know what? I'm not going to hold a grudge against myself for being this way. I had nothing to do with it. And then you can start actively working towards being the person you want to be, or really the person you already are that you're not being because you're shaming yourself into being something else.
Right.
That's probably a weird answer, but
Well, we kind of talked about this, throughout this conversation pretty much, but you talk a lot about personal development. I've said this before, but I feel like, especially, and because I'm talking with the MMA guy, I'm going to actually keep harping on this, but what that culture and what that lifestyle creates is just a constant personal development journey. Yeah. That you kind of stay on. So when you get actual outside of the jiu-jitsu mat and Muay Thai bag, all this other stuff, actual personal development. I know we've talked about different books that we both read and that we enjoy listening to certain podcasts and things of that nature. One of the things I like to do on this show is kind of talk about personal development. Is one of our core values with the Bison is be the example, which obviously is what we talk about all the time. Impact our community, serve our family, overcome our demons, and never stop growing. So in that never stop growing vein, we always talk about personal development. Currently, we actually just finished up. I think everybody's finished. I'm not sure. Are you finished with the book?
Nah. You can see it on his face.
Okay, Brandon, he's looking shaky over there. I just finished my third time going through David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. So Goggins, super powerful. Super powerful. I know, and Brandon tried to call me out, bro. Like the day before, he was gonna go do some event, like to raise I forgot what it was for, but it was something. And he's like, "Y'all want to come and squat like 3,000 pounds 20 times or whatever the hell he was talking about?" I was like, "Dude, first of all, no. I hurt my back already, so we're gonna chill on that." And then he's like, "Well, I guess I'll just carry the boats by myself." I was like, damn it, we're not letting him read no more personal development books. Like,
Dude, you need to pick smaller boats, bro. They were talking about canoes. You're over there picking up freaking like pontoons.
the boat that ran into that took the bridge out in Baltimore. He's like, let's squat this man. Let's carry this bitch. So going back to personal development, man. Like, so talk a little bit. I know you've got a couple of books you recommended to me that I've got in my queue. I actually have a hard copy of one that I'm definitely going to dive into. But talk about some books or podcasts or things that you kind of lean on. Obviously, the Bible is first and foremost.
First and foremost, yeah.
With all the Christians, and there's a lot of stuff that runs parallel with a lot of the content that I take in with the Bible.
Yep.
So that's a big piece for me. But what would you recommend and some of the things that you've leaned on?
You know, the thing about books is I think that from reading a lot of books, you start to realize that a lot of people say the same thing in different ways, you know, and so a lot of times people's favorite books, there's just the book they've read that clicked the best of them in that scenario, you know, and so I think when you're looking at books, you have to look at books for like certain things, right? Like, so I think everybody should have a book that they dive into that allows them to understand themselves more, allows them to understand how their brain works physically and how it's been programmed. Because a lot of times we think that we're a way because we're that way, and we don't realize that it's not that simple. You know, we've been programmed by a lot of things. So in that scenario, I think people need to be diving into guys like Joe Dispenza. You know, my favorite book that he has is Becoming Supernatural, but I think there's one like The Art of Not Being Yourself, Forgetting Who You Are, or something. Which one do you have? You have
I think the first one.
I think you have The Art of Not. Yeah, the Art of Forgetting or The Art of Not Being Yourself, or something like that. But essentially, Joe Dispenza, I would say The Art of Becoming Supernatural, I think, is his best book because I think it wraps everything up. But he has a lot of great books. But that book allows you to understand the mind a lot more and how it's programmed and how you can program it, you know, and kind of consciously direct yourself. So I think that's an important aspect. I think people should dive into Joe Dispenza. I think that if you're looking to get good at anything, you should also learn how to learn. And so The Art of Learning, I think, is a book that literally everybody could get a benefit from. And then
you know the author of that?
Josh, I was just thinking, I was like, man, how do I not remember his name?
I can't remember.
It's Josh something with a K, I believe. It'll come to me in a second. This is where you're like Jamie and you're like, The Art of Learning, who's it written by? And then you say it like in the earpiece that we don't have. You just say it out loud, you know? And I'm like, oh, Josh so-and-so. I think it's Josh something with a K. He'll tell us in a second. And so The Art of Learning. And then I think, I'm bad with authors, by the way. There's another book I'm about to tell you. I don't know the name of his authors. Ryan something. The Obstacle is the Way, I think, is another book.
Yeah.
It's Josh.
See, I knew it was Josh, and he had a weird last name. That's not my fault. Josh Witskin.
Yep. There's a K in there.
Yeah, something, you know. But so I would say The Obstacle is the Way, because I think that having something that allows you to understand what your mind's doing while it's doing it, so that you can have that conscious competency of it. You know, I think David Goggins' book's one of those. I think he doesn't. I think so. To me, Ryan in The Obstacle's the way he explains it to me, I think makes a little bit more logical sense. And so I like that. I like reading that. When I read David Goggins' book, I will say reading his book made me like go run. Like literally just get up and go run. And so his book's based a little bit more in emotion, and it's based off of life stories. And so I like both of them. They're both really, really good. But I think those are three areas that you definitely need in just a personal development aspect of your life. Just those three areas. Right. You know, something that's going to help you understand why you are the way you are, how your brain works, why you feel the way you feel about yourself. Find a book that teaches you how to learn new things. Find a book that teaches you how to think about things in a different way. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you know, if you're a parent, you should probably read a book about parenting. If you're a raising lions is a really good book about parenting. You should probably read a book about finances if you're, you know, an adult and you want to learn more
the book
about
on parenting. I'll tell you this: I've discovered a book, and I should have read it a long time ago because so many people have recommended it to me. But Wild at Heart was, God, it was so good. I wish I would have read that. I bought 5 copies of it whenever I read it just to give away to people.
Yep.
I gave one to my son, and I said, you know, you don't have to read this now, but before you have a child, you have to read this book, or I'm not giving you a new baby present.
You don't get any. You can't have my last name.
So so Wild at Heart's a very good book.
That's awesome.
So what I normally do is I'll start the book on audio. Mm-hmm. Audible is just the easiest way to take it in for me because I'll fall asleep or I'll read 3 pages and not even remember what I just read. So I have to hear a conversation form, and then if I get into it and I know it's really good, then I'll just stop where I'm at and I'll go ahead and order the book, and that way I'll go in and highlight and make notes and go along with it. And I did that with Wild at Heart, and man, that was good. And then Atomic Habits is another phenomenal book. It just helped me, like talking about reprogramming. It just really gave me some really simple steps to try to reprogram a lot of things. So you said earlier you're married, Hannah.
Yep.
So give me 2 cool stories. I want one back when you were dating Hannah, something that you did wrong. Or something that you did, you
something
got
I did wrong,
or something like.
You want me to tell that? I'll tell it.
And then maybe parenting, kind of a funny story, or something that happened. Like I can tell you this. Like me as a dad, my patience wasn't really good. You know, whenever I was in my 20s, and man, if I changed your diaper and I fed you and I did everything I know how to do, I'm at the end of my rope. Like I've done everything. We had that little wind up little thing you put them in and just wind it, get them on. And I had an extra bedroom that had a heavy bag in it. And I had a red light in there and a stereo sitting in the corner. That was the only thing in this room. So it was just, I go in there and kickbox and do my thing in there. So the mama would be at work at night, second shift. We work opposite shifts, so we wouldn't have to pay for a babysitter. And she'd come home 12:30, the baby would just be in the swing, in that room with the red light on and the stereo going. Like I just wind it up, say, bro, you got to just cry it out. Like you can't get out of this. You can't hurt yourself. I fed you.
I can't hear you. Have fun.
I can't hear you, man. I'm going to go in here and watch the game. Just cause I couldn't, dude. Like I just couldn't deal.
Hey, there's a book that says, you know, sometimes you gotta let them self-soothe, you know? So, my wife, if I let my son self-soothe for too long, my wife's going to give me a reason I'm going to need to self-soothe. And so I don't get to do that. I mean, we do that a little bit. We you know, I think that is a good tactic at some point. You can't just go in there. You got to like, hey, look. At some point, you just got to figure it out a little bit, you know? But, all right, 2 stories. Okay, so.
Don't get in trouble.
You know, this is
I'm making a reel out of this first one.
So this is more boo-boo on my end that ended up just kind of being, you know, okay, so when I'll tell you the backstory. Me and my wife met, literally, we were broke, man. To the point where, like, we met and within 2 or 3 weeks, she had basically moved in with me. You know, she was going through a place. She'd moved from Columbia and didn't really have a good spot. She was living on a friend's couch. Finds out that the friend's renting out all the rooms in the house. A friend of hers had gotten a divorce with the husband. The husband, the Millby is separated. The husband owned the house. The girl didn't have a job. So it was a 5-bedroom house. So she started renting out all the rooms. Well, Hannah had worked with her. And so Hannah moved to Greenville with her boyfriend. Boyfriend cheated on her. She moved out instantly, not really planning things. Friend said, hey, I don't really have a room for you, but I got this couch you can rent. So long story short, this Hannah was renting like this couch to live on for like $200 a month or whatever. So long story short, we find out like 3 weeks in or so that a couple people renting the room was doing some sketchy stuff, like making drugs in the house because they didn't care. They just rented a room.
So she's renting a couch in a meth lab.
Essentially, a really nice one because it's a 5-bedroom house.
So
and it's
200
really nice.
was probably too much.
Too much,
Yeah,
So she finds this out, and she calls me, and she's like, "I don't know what to do." And I was like, "I'll tell you what you're gonna do. You're gonna pack up all your stuff. I'm coming to get you. You're gonna live with me for a little while. We'll figure this out until you can find it in place." So that's what we did. Because I mean, girlfriend, not girlfriend. Just if you're my friend and you're in that scenario, like I'm gonna bring you to my house. That's just who I am. So she came over. She stayed. We were living together for probably 2 or 3 weeks. I was about to like sign a new lease and go somewhere, and for whatever reason, man, I just kind of like, I don't want to say I knew, but like I liked having her around more than I didn't, and she'd actually gone back to Colombia. This is so early in our relationship. She called me and was like, "Hey, do you think there's anything to this?" I said, "What?" She's like, "Do you think there's anything to this?" Because like I'm in Colombia right now, and like I can just stay here. There's nothing really keeping me in Greenville. I got like a serving job, but like I don't really have anything holding me there. Like, do you think this? I'll stay in Greenville, but like if not, like, if this isn't something serious for you, and I'm like, man, I said, don't move to Greenville for me. I was like, I don't know. I'm like 25. I'm not sure if I'm right. Yeah. So she ends up coming back to Greenville, so we end up living together because we were so broke. Like at one point, I think she didn't have she had glasses she wasn't wearing. She never wore them. I didn't know she had glasses. I was letting her drive my truck and stuff. One day, I find out that she's legally blind. Literally. So I was like, we have glasses. She's like, oh, they're broke. I've just never had money to fix them. I'm like, what? So go fix your glasses. And that's kind of the day we realized, like, I think we had $300 total. And I said, look, we've got nothing. What's yours is mine. Like, we'll make this work. And right after that, we basically kind of started dating, which is another funny story. It was Thanksgiving. I was working. At this time, we had moved from that apartment into a house with my brother. And she was living with us. And so, but she wasn't technically my girlfriend yet. She'd been living with me for like a month, but she wasn't my girlfriend yet. And so I have a traditional family, and I was like, look, I'm working. My brother's going to my mom and dad's house for Thanksgiving. You're going to go with him. She said, no, I'm not. I said, you're not sitting over at his house by yourself on Thanksgiving. It's a holiday. Like, come on. It's not what my family does. Like, if you were a homeless person that we knew, we'd take you in. Like, you're going. Right. And she said, that's not why. She said, I'm not going to meet your family. It's your friend girl. I was like,
here it is.
Tell him you're my girlfriend. And she was like, well, am I? And I was like, you live with me. Yes. So that's how we got together officially. But funny story. So this is probably 4 or 5 years down the road. And it's not funny because it is a problem that I've had in the past, which is like one of my issues has been gambling. Like the issue is I've been good at it. Like I started off playing poker in college, literally won thousands of dollars in college playing online poker, and went and I've gambled over the years, won thousands of dollars playing craps and stuff. But like I've also been broke a lot of times, and like I probably shouldn't have been gambling. So long story short, I got addicted with craps. Like I shouldn't say addicted at first. I became obsessed with the game of craps to the point where I built a craps table at my house to like regulation. I bought dice that you really threw, and I practiced probably 4 to 6 hours a day throwing dice. Kid you not. For 6 to 8 months every day. I mean, because when I hyper focus on something, I'm not a middle of the road person. To the point where I don't do a lot of things I want to do because I know what I'm going to get into it wholeheartedly, balls deep, until I get to that point. I'm like, oh, I figured out how to do this.
Right.
So I had buddies that would come over and play. I could do all the math in my head. I was basically, I could have been a dealer at the time. But we were broke, man. Like no money, both serving. So there was a time I think we had maybe $200 or $300 to our name. Well, I had wanted to go and practice on the craps table, and I designed this strategy that was like, oh, I could play for free. You could play a $10 pass and a $10 don't pass. They always cancel each other out under like, unless you somehow roll like a 15. I mean, I'm sorry, if somehow roll an 11 or a 7, right? And so I would play that and like basically it's just free for me to roll on a real table with real people. But I had no money. I think I had like $20-$30. So back then I would take, and I got dollar chips. And I would put
Cherokee.
Yeah, up in Cherokee. Yeah. I'd put 10 and 10, and then I'd put $1 on Yo 11 to protect myself. If it hit, I'd win $15, and then it was never really to win a game. But they also had this thing called a fire bet, where if you threw all the numbers before you hit a 7, like you could win crazy odds. Like if you threw 4 out of 6, you got 25 to 1. If you threw 5 out of the 6, you got 250 to 1. And if you threw 6 out of 6 before hitting a 7 out, you got 1,000 to 1 odds. So I'd been thrown a couple times. It was my turn. I was about to leave. My wife's working at the time. She's working. She opened the Ruth's Chris downtown in Greenville. She's working crazy hours. I was running a karate program, like not working that much. And so she was kind of supporting me, which is another thing, which was part of the story. So I'm like, yeah, babe, I'm gonna, I'm sorry. Maybe she was at work, or maybe she was at Atlanta. I forget. I basically told her I was wanting to go to Harris. She said, absolutely not. No, we don't have the money. I said, nah, okay, whatever. Still went. Back then I was younger, dumber. If you told me no, it was basically a guarantee I'm going to. So she said no. So I said, okay. So I went. Well, long story short, the last time I'm there, I put $2 on craps table for the fire bet. 10 and 10. Dude, I rolled for 45 minutes. Setting dice, throwing exactly what I'm rolling. Want a hard 8? Boom, hard 8. I hit the fire bet. So I win $2,000 off a $2 bet. There's people at this table, mind you, that won 70 or 80 grand off me rolling. I mean, I literally it was like the dream that I had seen in my head. Like lining these dice up, hard 8, boom, hard 8. Lining hard 6 up, boom, hard 6. Like they shut the table down after I rolled. I rolled for so long that they lost a ton of money on that table. And well, when you win 1,000 to 1 bet, you got to sign a W-9 because it's a jackpot bet. So you get taxes on it. So I'm like, I'm in trouble now, dude. Like, so this is the plan. I'm gonna go home with this money. I got $2 grand. I'm gonna go home with this money. I'm gonna tell her I won poker tonight at my friend's house. I'm gonna tell her because I won poker tonight, I'm gonna go to Harris tomorrow night. I'll just say I'm gone. Come up here for a second or so.
So she didn't know that you were even.
She didn't know I was at Harrisburg.
Oh my god. Okay.
So if you want to win a lot of money at Harris, make sure your wife doesn't know. You'll win a bunch of money and then you'll get caught because of it, right? So I come back, I have this this $2 grand, and it's all in I think it's all in hundreds, and I put it like in a plastic bag with the tax form. And I'm like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna tell her this thing. And so I come home, I'm like, hey, we won poker tonight. I'm gonna take the money, and she's like, no, you're not. We got bills. We got this. And I'm like, no, but I got like $200. I'm gonna go. Trust me, it's gonna be good. I got a feeling. And she's like, no, like not doing that. And I'm like, baby, come on. Oh, so we're fighting over this.
Yeah, it's backfired.
We get in a full on fight. I'm standing my ground. I'm like, nah, yeah, full on. So she leaves. I start playing video games. I'm like, dude, I'm not doing this. So I'm gonna go anyways. Bro, it's not 15 minutes. She walks in the door. Handful of money. She lays on the table. She's like, what is this? Right? And so like, oh, man.
Dude, you should have just said, I'm selling drugs, bro. Like just.
Well, that's the problem. It has the Harris slip that's on the taxes. So she knows exactly what it is. And instantly I'm like, oh. And like, I knew I messed up, man. And we're broke, dead broke. And like, I messed up in the sense that I lied to her. Because I didn't gamble any money. Like I literally took like $40 with me. Like it wasn't something that was a big deal. It wasn't like I was gambling all of our money by any means, but I lied to her. Okay?
How far of a drive is it from where you were at to Cherokee?
2 hours.
So you drove 2 hours with $40.
Yeah. I mean, just to throw the dice. I mean, I was 26, 26, maybe 25, 20. I was broke, dude. I was like, it wasn't unnormal for me to only have $200 to my name, you know? And so, anyways, I take it, I walk out, or I'm sorry, she puts it on the table, she walks out, and she is, at this point, I don't know if she's leaving me or not. Like, she didn't like to be lied to. So I'm like, all right, I messed up, dude. So I walked in the table. I threw it on the table. I said, listen, it's $2,000, it's yours. And I walked out, right? And that was the end of it. Like, $2,000 is yours. I turned around and walked out.
Well, 400 of it's going to Uncle Sam.
Well, yeah.
1,600 of it's yours.
Yeah, right. So I waited about 15, 20 minutes and walked back in there. I said, hey, what are you doing? And she said, I just booked our cruise for September. And so she was mad for about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then she was like, we're going on a vacation. So she booked the cruise, paid for it right away, and we laughed about it. And I told her the story of, like, she's like, where did you get the money to gamble? And I told her the story. I was like, babe, this is my luck. I hit the jackpot. You know, I went down there, I threw these. Like, I wish I had money. If I had put money on it, I would have made so much more, you know. And long story short, ever since then, I've just lost in craps.
Yeah, right.
It's not even fun. It's not even fun anymore. I go down, I'm like, I'm gonna set it. I go to throw it. No, you know, I just 7 out. But so that's kind of a funny, tragic story. Another story, super short story. One of the first real dates me and my wife ever went on, she got, well, not really first real dates, I should say. It wasn't a real date. She was out with her friends. I went and picked her up. We were early on dating. I went and picked her up, and she threw up all over me. Like, literally, I saw it coming. I had a towel. Like, I was trying to, like, help her out, and she just got up and walked right at me and threw up. Literally, I could have moved, but it would have been all over my carpet. So I had a decision to make. So I just had a towel. I just stood there and just caught it all. And so we have a joke that's like, hey, if you want to keep your man, throw up on him in the first couple of weeks. It's like it's like marking your territory, you know. But so those are kind of some funny stories for me and Hannah.
I'll tell you a funny story about throwing up.
Mm.
So we used to have these fight parties, like all through the 90s, man. You had Roy Jones and Tyson and all the greatest era. I can't imagine a better era of boxing than the 90s, man. There's just so many great fights. And so my house was Grand Central. And so we got over there, and we would kind of run like a true party. So we had all the alcohol. We lived not far from the Navy base, and I had some buddies that were in the service. They'd go and not have to pay taxes on it, so they'd go and get us a bunch of alcohol. And we were playing a game called Mexico. In Mexico, you roll. It's like just 2 dice. You're rolling, and 21, like you double the bet, but you're betting shots. And immediately, I'm going straight to three shot max, or I'm calling you a pansy if you don't. So we're just like gambling 3 shots at a time on every roll. So you can imagine how fast that gets out of control. And so we've done drank literally a gallon of Captain Morgan, and God knows what else. So I know I'm going to throw up. So it's a planned vomit this time. Like, I know this is coming. So I go and now keep in mind, like, we've got a high percentage of females at this party and a very low percentage of males, the best ratio to have for a party. And so I know the voices. I'm either related or played ball with everybody, all the dudes that's at my party. So I know who they are. So I go in the bathroom, I close the door, and planned it out. Like, I got bony knees, so I don't like to get on my knees. It hurts my knees. So I done folded up a towel for my knees. Man, I got a nice warm rag. Like, I done ran a rag. I got it ready to wipe down my face. And so I'm like, okay, here we go. I'm literally holding the bowl, right? And I bend over, I start throwing up. Well, then I feel somebody holding my head down. And like, I am projectile vomited, bro. And it's just splattering back on my face, and I'm just losing. And I'm gagging, and like, it's a mess, dude. And I'm cussing. I'm like, get this. And so I'm yelling, like, telling my brothers to come get this dude off of me. I'm reaching behind me, like, trying to grab his leg or something, dude. And finally, my brothers are out there yelling. They're like, man, what's going on? They're like counting the dudes. They're like, man, there's nobody in there. So I'm just pissed, dude. I'm going crazy. And they break my bathroom door to get in there. And they all of us just start laughing at me, bro. The toilet seat had came down around my damn neck. And I was so drunk that I had no idea that it was a toilet seat, bro. I was so freaking drunk, man. So yeah, that was that's how
sounds
that
like a
went
good
down.
drinking story.
Man, that was rough, brother.
Woo.
But yeah, that's how drunk do you got to be just chunks of throw up on your face, bro. You just, I was pissed. If I could have got a hold of him, Cody, man,
You got him.
it'd have been some Roy
Went
Jones
over.
stuff going on down there. For sure, bro.
Oh, that's rough.
Anyway, so
That's rough.
yeah, that's how that went down. So glad we could trade out some vomiting stories together.
It's been a while since I've vomited due to alcohol. I got sick not too long ago with a stomach bug, and whew. But I don't have a bad relationship with throwing up. We used to do workouts when we were training for like kickboxing, and when we were doing kickboxing training, we'd have these days where the instructor would just pull out this old trash can. It's probably like 50 years old. It's this brown trash can called the Brown Beauty, and when it came out, nobody went home until everybody threw up. That was the rule. And so to this day, like if you were like, hey, I'll give you $100 to throw up right now, I walk the trash can and throw up on command. Like doesn't even bother me at all. Like I mean, I can literally just throw up. So it doesn't bother me too bad to throw up. That and fraternity, what they would schmazing, not that that happens at all in fraternities ever, but like back in the 1900s when I was in college, it might have happened a little bit. We had this the way this. I think it's been long enough I can say this. We had a way where we initiated kids, and everybody got initiated in my fraternity. I was at SAE, and so what we would do is we would get these kids. Pledge week, you're like nice to everybody. You're like selling them the idea. You should join my fraternity. You're gonna need to get your mom and dad to pay $800 a semester so we can have parties, and so they sell you on it. They give you the bid, and you get this bid from the school. It's just like this official bid. It's like a piece of paper. Well, we always had it where you had to get your official bid from us. You just don't know how it's gonna happen. And so all the pledges accept. We rally them up. This is your pledge cast. Awesome. Hey, we've got something special for you guys. And we'd take them, or we got taken to a place, you have a party, and they would bring out like 2 kegs right away. And they're like, hey, rubber band them, no beer hits the ground, nonstop drinking. And you're just like, what? It's like 500 beers, there's 30 of us. And so you get to the idea where it's just like, you fill up 2 beers, you drink them, you walk to the fence, you throw them up, and you just keep that process going. And that sounds terrible now I'm saying it out loud, but that was college. And so then what they would do is, you're this young kid, you're drunk. They'd pull you off to the side with a group of like 4 or 5 dudes. Quietly, hey, what's up, man? Come talk to me. What's up? You doing okay? And they would surround you, and they would make up some BS story. Like, yeah, hey, you remember last week when you were talking junk about that dude? You remember last week when you flirted with this girl? That was my girlfriend, And they basically act like they're going to rough you up, beat you up. And it's kind of like some people lose their bids during this. Because if you act like a little girl, like, dude, fuck out of here. We don't want you to be our fraternity, So they kind of get you, they always give you 3 choices. Hey, you got 3 choices, dude. Choice number 1, you can leave. Leave right now and hope we never see you on campus, because if we do, we're going to beat you up. Option number 2, you can take your beating right now. Like, let's go. We're gonna beat you up right now, and if you handle this like a man, maybe we'll let you in. And you're just like, phew. And then they're like, option number 3, you can shake my hand and accept your bid to SAE. So they it's this whole mind thing. Right. And so they did that to us, and I remember literally like I squared up. I actually took me with another guy named Brent Ayers, and they said that, and dude, without thinking, me and him went to high school together, or went to middle school together. Without thinking, we stepped back. Like, hey, guys are like, no, we're just a joke, You
didn't even let him get to the handshaking option.
No, we didn't even get to it.
Bitch, let's go.
Like, it's 5 of y'all and 2 of us. Like, you might get us, but it's not gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Granted, I was so wasted, I probably would have just fallen on my face. But there was a lot of scenarios like that as a fraternity kid where I just learned that the ability to throw up sometimes is your best friend.
Awesome.
Just get it out.
Well, man, So we had a lot of great combos. Now we're going to get into while we're here is Into the Storm. So what we like to do is kind of talk about, some kind of a tough time in your life, something that you went through, you know, something that, you grew from in the moment. It was like really tough and didn't know how you was going to get through it, and just kind of share a story. We try to get into the personal side. Sometimes it's professional. Sometimes they blend together, man. But so what do you got, man?
There's been a lot of things that I've had to come through my life. I think the weird thing is everybody has tough things, but not everybody things seem so tough after you hear them out loud, but it's all, everybody deals with their own scenarios and they feel life threatening, just like, everything else for other people. But for me, I'll say I've had a pretty blessed life. I'd probably say one of the hardest things for me to ever go through was when I was younger and I lost some friends in a house fire. I had, being in that fraternity, I had 7 friends die in a house fire that I was supposed to be at. I was supposed to go the weekend there with them. It was the weekend of October 28th, and Tennessee had a game against Carolina. My dad had started working with a new company based out of Tennessee, and those 2 years, I didn't miss a Carolina game, home or away. I traveled everywhere, and for whatever reason, we couldn't get. I don't know if it was like a certain game at Tennessee, if we were ranked a certain. We couldn't get tickets to the Tennessee game, and so we'd all plan to go to the beach that weekend instead. And my dad happened to call me Thursday night before we were leaving Saturday or Friday morning. My dad called me. He said, "Son, I've got 2 tickets to this Tennessee game. Is there any chance you'd want to go?" And I hadn't seen my dad in months. My dad's my hero, and so I was like, "Dude, yeah. I'm supposed to go to the beach. I'll just call these dudes." He's like, "Oh, you can go to the beach, dude. It's not I said, no. It's my fraternity brothers. Like, every other guy in the house has a beach house. We can go to the beach anytime we want, And so I went with him, and that weekend, house in Ocean Isle was burnt down, and there's 13 people in it. 7 people passed away. And that was tough. 2 of the guys that passed away I went to high school with. They were like little brothers to me in the fraternity. They'd actually played baseball behind me in high school, and then joined the fraternity 1 year under me. And so I was in a lot of ways a big brother, and they were always at my house. It was just a tough thing to deal with. And it was really the first scenario in my life where somebody was gone too soon and it wasn't expected. And man, it ripped me out of who I was as a person, and it actually pulled me out of college. I got into some things that I just realized weren't for me there, and I was coping with this pain in a way that I shouldn't have, and so I bailed and went back to my roots of martial arts and dove back into the karate school that I grew up in, and so that was probably one of the toughest things. But that's been 15 years, I think. So probably the more recent thing that's really been tough.
Let's go back on that, because you talked earlier. I know you're a faith-based man. You're a Christian guy, and you've been that your whole life.
Yeah.
In that moment, I'm sure that was the first time you were really kind of tested, because I know when we lose young people, it's like, what was the point of this? Like,
man, it's so crazy you say that. This might make me cry. So it's actually the opposite. So I grew up in a small church, and the church my parents basically seeded in a way. They've been there forever. And the youth group I was in had 5 people in it. It was very small when I started 12, 13 years old getting into it. Long story short, we hired this guy named Mike, one of the best youth directors I've ever seen in my life. And he grew our program from 5 kids to 65 kids in a year. He was just really good at what he did, connecting with youth. And he became a role model to me. Loved the dude. Well, stay with him to senior year. I'm going to college to be a youth pastor. Is how much I'm admiring this guy. How much it meant to me that how much he affected me in my life. He helped me get through the passing of my my mom's father when I was in high school. It was just a big impact, and he taught me how to do good in the world. And long story short, he ends up cheating on his wife with a lady in the church, and me being this young kid, this guy's supposed to be perfect. Dude, you're a youth pastor, man. What? And it just ripped me out, because he left, and that hurt our whole youth group. The whole youth group got split because of it, and it it just ripped me out. And it was right before I went to college. And so I split off. Like, I was looking at Christian college. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I was looking at going to school for Lander to play baseball. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to University of South Carolina. And I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to be somebody different. And so, crazy thing is like, from high school to the moment those kids died, I partied hard. Like, I was a version of myself that I really am not proud of. I never like hurt anybody or did anything crazy. Like, but I mean, I was a hardcore college fraternity partier. And when those kids passed away, you know, not gonna lie, it took me down a path. But when they were having their funerals, I was sitting at my friend's house. It was the year that the Boston Red Sox beat the New York Yankees for the World Series for the first time. They broke the curse. Forget what year that is. But I'm sitting at my friend Kelly Payton's house. I'll never forget it because my dad calls me and he says, "Where you at?" And I told him. He said, "I got to talk to you." And I said, "What's up, Dad?" And I really hadn't like cried about the event, you know. And he said, "So I prayed a lot about my job, and I hadn't, and for whatever reason, God always told me to go to the place I was at. He always told me to go to that. Like, there were so many job options, and just like everything shouted at me to go to this place. And it didn't make sense at first, but for whatever reason, it's where God sent me. And like, I trusted it, and I went there, and it never, ever made sense. I've even asked God, because after I took that job, I got sent out of town. I couldn't stay with my wife. I had to work on the road. And he said, and now I know. He said, because if I hadn't have been working in Tennessee, I would have never had tickets to the Tennessee game. And you would have been in that house. And you could have been dead in that fire. And he said, and that's why God sent me to Tennessee. And he said that in the moment. Like, I don't know why, but like, it was like I knew it was right. And I just broke down in tears. And I cried and I cried. And I realized like I had lost my faith. You know, at that time I was arguing against Christians for like the fact that God didn't exist. I was trying to prove to myself that he did. I was trying to find somebody that could like prove that, nah, he's real. But I was going about it like from hate. I was so hurt. And so that was a moment where it was actually the opposite. Where when my dad called me and said that, it like snapped me into it, and I realized it. Now for the next 6 months, I ran as hard as I could back to that other version of myself and tried to find comfort in the partying and the drugs and alcohol and things. And but I couldn't. And it was one day that like it just clicked to me like, hey man, you got to go home. You got to get back to being you and who you're supposed to be on this planet. And so it kind of restored my faith in a way, actually. Yeah. But it was tough, man. It's tough. It's real tough.
So looking back on it, you know, somebody young like that, this maybe has, you know, I've been around, you know, and coaching, you know, I was around a lot of kids that, you know, tragic things happen in their lives. And I mean, it's so hard to console, you know, young people because they don't have enough life perspective, you know what I mean? And it's just like, they don't have enough good built up to have perspective of like, hey, this is just the ebbs and flows. You know, it just seems like a lot happens, you know, to them at a young age. But what would be some advice you would give to someone, whether it be somebody younger that's dealing with something like that, or somebody that's like the parent of, or somebody like that, just advice on how to deal with loss like that?
Man, I don't know. I think that you have to. Here's the thing: is when we lose somebody that close to us, and this is going to sound really unempathetic in a sense. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but like the reason it hurts so bad when you lose somebody in your life isn't because you've lost them realistically. It's because you've lost that version of you. You've lost that reflection of you. You've lost that person to you, right? And so we're all programmed to care more about ourselves than anything else in the world. You know, oh no, I care about my kid more than anything else in the world. That's because it's your kid. So you're still caring about yourself more, right? And so we're programmed for that, and that's okay. But because of that, we tend to go the wrong way about some things sometimes. And so I feel like that when people lose somebody, the hurt comes from the fact that there's an aspect of your life and representation, a void in your own self now that is empty, because you picked up that person in your circle in your life and they've represented something to you, and now it's gone. And so you don't feel the same anymore internally. And so the only way for me personally to get through a gap like that, when I lose someone that really, really meant a lot to me and made up a lot of me, is to understand that the only way to really glorify them and really do right by them is to fill that void they left with something they'd be proud of, you know, and use it as fuel, use that emotion and that pain in a way to better yourself, because ultimately it's going to hurt. Like, suffering's real. What we do when we suffer is our choice and how we can kind of accommodate it. And so I think when my advice to people would be, you know, figure out how to be that person for somebody else. That thing that person did for you, whatever it was, whatever meant so much to you that losing it has put a hole in your heart. The only way you're going to fill it is to become the version of that person that they were for you, for someone else. You know, and to live up to that, to honor that in a sense, you know, like, but I'm not one to sit here and tell somebody how to deal with a loss. Like, if you've lost a good friend, man, it's really tough. If you've lost a kid, I can't even, you know, begin to understand how to get through that. But I would say that you have to understand that you're going to get through it. Yeah. You know, it's like a simple analogy is if you lay in bed at night and you're awake and you think to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm never going to go to sleep. I can't sleep. Rest assured, you're going to lay there all night, tossing and turning. But if you can calm your mind and you can just think, hey, I'm going to eventually fall asleep. Like, I'm going to eventually get tired. I'm eventually going to fall asleep. You'll fall asleep pretty quickly. And so I think that frame of mind of just reminding yourself that this too shall pass in all aspects of life, you know, but the hard aspects, this too shall pass. The really fun, exciting time where life's just going right, this too shall pass, you know, and learning how to feel the emotions of things, but not become them. And that, again, you're only going to get those opportunities in times of vulnerability, you know? And so
one of the things that I recently heard was it said that, you know, in losing someone close to you is that, you should really focus on taking on the best qualities that they had in them. Is like, would you want to try to reflect that in your own life? And it's a way to try to carry them on, like continue them. And one of the things that I've talked about a lot of times, I share a story a lot about the tattoo I have here, of Leonidas and what that represents to me. And I won't share that here today, but, you know, I do tell that story quite often. And it's like, you know, it truly is like when someone passes away, you know, as long as you keep telling their story, as long as you keep talking about them and breathing life into their spirit, you know, here, then they continue to live on in a lot of ways. And I've also kind of used that same, you know, frame of reference and as far as negative stuff, because a lot of times, you know, our past, we spend so much time, you know, that whole windshield and the rearview mirror thing. When we talk so much about our past and the hard times that we've come through and the things that have broken us before, sometimes you keep breathing life into that so much that it ends up becoming, you know, it's still, you're breathing life in that same way.
Yep.
So it's just, you know, perspective as you get older, you know, these gray hairs tell stories. So, you know, that's kind of the benefit of going through life and stuff. And that's why I think it's so tough to, you know, hear stories of young people, college age that, you know, deal with stuff like that. And you don't have enough perspective in life yet to to really adequately deal with that. So you really just need those mentors and those people in your life, and obviously your faith should be the foundation. But even that gets hard at times, because we all kind of go through the valleys. You know what I mean?
It's supposed to.
So in closing down, man, like what is I like to try to ask this is what is a motto or a quote or something that you refer to quite often that you kind of either for yourself or share with other people?
Well, it's tough. One motto. Well, I guess I have like one thing that I kind of tell people about pretty religiously. And then there's one motto, and I'll kind of give you those both quickly. So the one thing I usually tell people is there's always three people that you are in your head, and there's always three relationships that you have going on simultaneously. And so some people say that, you have your public version, your private version, and your secret version. I use those as you have your relationships with other people, you have a relationship with yourself, and you have a relationship with God. And to me, there are three similar aspects of life. I think that the issue is that a lot of people think that who they are is their public version. And so they, in their head, they look at this version that they could be, that they put out to people, that they want people to believe that they are, that doesn't really exist. And they try to achieve that. And through doing that, one, it's a fallacy. You can't, because you don't know what other people are thinking, and you don't control what other people are thinking. So I always say that what other people see in you isn't real. It's just their perspective. They don't actually know enough about you to have a true opinion of you. So most people, though, that's who they aspire to be, is their public version. And then their private life is usually a version of that they can't quite uphold to, that their family or close people get to see. They're a little bit more vulnerable. They kind of make mistakes. They're upset about it. They're usually defensive in that side, because all of a sudden they know that they're not this version, and they assume the person in their life that's that close to them knows they're not that version, so they're defensive. And then the secret version of their life is usually the version they don't like, or it's the version of things that they don't want anybody to know. And unfortunately, the public version of you isn't real. It's a perspective. The private version of you isn't real. It's a reflection, so my wife never really sees me. She sees herself in me, right? And because we see each other the most, we see the most accurate reflection of ourselves in each other. But that's not a real version of me. That's just who she thinks I am. So the only real version of me is my secret version. And it's where we didn't get into quantum physics or anything, but it's where my vibrations come from. It's how I feel about myself. It's how I create the emotional state inside of my ecosystem, which is my body. And so if I generate all of my feelings off this secret version, but the secret version of who I am is all the worst sides of me, man, the frequencies of which I put out about myself is shame and guilt and hate and all these negative emotions, because I'm here, I'm looking at this guy that's this public idea of a version of myself that I think I could be if I were perfect, if you would, and I shame myself for not being him. And so I feel like I'm down here, right? And then I'm looking up here into my public life or my private life, and I'm assuming they think I'm this, but I can't be that. So every time they question anything, I just get defensive. And it's really a recipe for disaster. And so I tell everybody, focus on your secret. Like, your secret life is you. So you have to do more things in secret to feel good about yourself, to where there's nothing you could ever do to tell somebody else all the great things about you, right? I always use the example, if I spend 4 hours a day praying to God and just asking him, be with Ken, be with my friends, be with my family. Like, I want this for them. And I'm really just like pouring into other people. And I have these incredible thoughts about these other people. And I'm really just working on loving others. And then I maybe spend another 2 hours of just learning and trying to make myself better, and do all that in secret. That's 6 hours of work. Now I've got to find, if I want to just have a private version of me that is just as good, I've got to go find somebody It's either willing to sit there with me for all 6 hours and watch me do it, or willing to sit with me and talk to me for 6 hours so I can tell them all the things I did. Not realistic, right? And then to get that to a public scenario, it's like, it's impossible. So the way that I'm going to feel about myself is going to be very secure, because I'm going to know the amount of work I've put into being who I'm going to be. And so, like David Goggins says, you can't hurt me. Gary Vee says it a different way. Gary Vee says, everybody thinks I don't care what people think. He goes, and it's because I don't in a sense care what you think. He goes, but it's not the reason you think it is. He goes, I know myself so much that I know that I care so much about your opinion that if I'm doing anything outside of stuff that I 100% believe in, that your opinion will pull me off that track. So I can only do things that I 100% believe in, because if I 100% believe in them, there's nothing you can say to hurt me. It's when I do things that I don't 100% believe in that you can start creeping into my belief system. And so he says, I care about what people think so much that I only do things I believe in 100% because I know that I care. And when I'm operating at 100% belief, there's nothing you can say that I care about, because I'm doing my best. I believe in what I'm doing. So I really believe that people should rewire themselves, do things in secret that make yourself proud of yourself, and don't tell anybody. That will leave you with a feeling of yourself that has value, because of what you are getting out of the situation is what you're putting in is less than you got out of it. So keep it a secret. 2, now, because you feel that way and you feel so good about yourself and you're happy, the person in your secret life, the person closest to you, they're not going to get the perfect version of you. They're not going to get the version that you have of you, but you're going to do your best to like show them that side. And now the public view, well, it's always going to be the worst, and that's okay. You know, you look at the people out there that are the most successful people in the world, you know, some of our friends that have followings and stuff. You show me a millionaire on social media that's like always flexing about their cars. You show me a millionaire that's always like, they don't. The ones that are flexing online, this is a secret. If they're flexing about the stuff they have online, they probably don't actually have it. They're trying to prove to you that they can get it. If they got it, they don't flex online. They got it. They don't care. You know what they do online is they want to seem more relatable. And so they share their biggest losses. They share their vulnerabilities to the public, and they say, hey, here's my vulnerabilities. This is the worst side of me. You guys get to see it, right? Because they know inherently that they have the answer for all of those problems. They don't care if you judge them off the problem they had, because they're so happy they had it, because the person they've become secretly. And so I tell people all the time, everybody's heard the book, The Secret. Right? Have you heard of the book, The Secret? Oh yeah, I've heard of it. Okay. So then why is it called The Secret? It's not because no one knows about it. It's because if you want to generate the feelings you need to get what you want in the world, you can't tell everybody what you're doing. You can't let somebody create their emotions. You can't have a negative voice. You have to put in so much work in secret that you know that you deserve things, whether you say it or not. And you don't need to speak it to get validation, because you know the validation's coming from the work. And so that would be the thing that I would say, like, that's the thing I try to tell people the most is like, build your relationship. And that goes back to that first 3 relationships. Build your relationship with God first. If you have a good relationship with God, you could actually have a good relationship with yourself. And if you have a good relationship with yourself, well, you will actually believe you can have a good relationship with somebody else. If you truly love who you are, you will believe somebody else can love you. And if you're truly loving who you are, you're going to look to love other people. So you're going to assume other people are looking to love you. And so now your interaction in the world drastically changes how it feels. As far as the one saying I would say, and this will transition over a little bit. I'll say this at the end, and let's leave some controversy for you. This is why I think Jake Paul beats Mike Tyson. Because you are not what you have done. You are what you repeatedly do. So I don't care if you were a world champion 30 years ago. Unless you're trained like a world champion every day, you're not a world champion right now. It goes back to what I said, what a black belt is. I don't care if you got your black belt 10 years ago. Unless you're training 3 times a week, you're not a black belt. You might have gotten it, but you're not actively one. And so that's what I'm harping on this year. That's my quote of the year. You are not what you've done. You are what you repeatedly do. You know, and so if you look at it that way, Mike Tyson is a podcaster who smokes a bunch of pot. And Jake Paul is a professional boxer who trains and fights
5 or 6 years now, isn't he?
5 or 6 years. He spends $1 million a year on his training camps. Like he really is. I know he doesn't have the skill set because the boxing era was so much better in the 90s. And listen, full transparency, I hope Mike Tyson knocked him out.
Right.
But
I feel the same way as you. I'm saying the same thing. Like, if Tyson catches him, and he's got a lot more, a lot more experience, but and just watching, I wish Roy would have been in better shape.
Yeah,
I mean, that was pitiful.
It's just hard to get in better shape, though. Like, here's the perfect scenario. Okay, you're a football guy, right? I know you're good at football, right? And we went out to go out to Revolt Retreat and get out there, and you know more about everybody than football. There's some 19-year-old kid runs a route and he goes right by you, and you know how to cover him.
Right.
Bro, he's 19.
That's why I play quarterback, bro.
And
I
dude,
ain't doing all that.
And the crazy thing is you know what really probably happened is that first play, that 19-year-old came out there, boom, checked him up, held him in check, like, you're not getting past me.
Yeah.
But like 15 minutes in, I'm like, hey, dude, somebody else get this kid because I'm not guarding him. Like, he's running deep every time.
I need a safety over the top, bro.
Yeah, like,
Roll
so,
coverage, baby.
So that's what I would say is don't get your ego is going to attach to you and try to convince you that you were those things that you've done in the past, because it's what it's trying to convince you to do is to not achieve anything in the present, and it's robbing you of your power, because the only place in existence that you have power is the present moment. But what most people do with their present moment is reminisce about the past, where they have zero power. You can't change the past. And so you're using the only moment of time that you have power in to render yourself powerless by thinking about something that you have no power in, either the past or the future. So getting off that kick of thinking that you've done something, unless you're doing it every day, you're not that thing. And if you're not that thing, what are you trying to be? And it's okay. It's okay that you're no longer that thing. It's okay that Tom Brady's no longer a quarterback.
Well, you can talk about this in all kind of sports, but the difference of how you finish a season and the way that you come back to spring ball is like you're like a whole different player. Like, completely. You could look like a 5-star, and then you're like a 3. Like, dude, there's a reason why those guys start off with handoff drills every practice. I mean, these are professional athletes, and you look like Kobe Bryant talking about when you read the book Relentless, and just it opens up with him. Just Tim Grover goes in, and the guys just out there 4 a.m. just 2-3 weeks ago or won a championship, league MVP, and he's out there doing drills with no basketball for like an hour, just like footwork and drop steps and all of his footwork. And it's like that dedication, because he understands, and it's the same whether it's fighting or boxing or quarterback play or anything like that. It's literally like you always, I mean, think about this. You see a guy that was a champion 2 years ago, and now just 2 short years ago, this guy, you look at him and there's no chance he's ever getting that belt back.
Never.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, that was 2 years ago, man. Like, so when you talk about, how quick it can go away from you, I mean, it's amazing. I think, so let me, before we leave, John Jones. What's your thoughts on John?
I've met John, and I think John is a really, really inherently good person. I think he has a good heart. But this is what I'll say. He's had some issues, we all have. I would tell you that if you were the champion of the world at 21 years old, I would challenge you that you wouldn't make the decisions you think you would make, And so while I think he's made a great deal of mistakes in his career in some personal aspects, I sympathize with the fact that it's harder to make the right decisions when you have more decisions readily available to you. Like, everyone's like, oh man, I would never do a bunch of cocaine and go out with 10 strippers. Well, yeah, you never would, because you don't have the $30,000 that night's going to cost you to go do that, And so I'm not saying he should have, and I there's a lot of great champions that haven't, But I will say that he got to the top of the game early on. I think he's the greatest fighter to ever live. I think he was built for fighting. I think he's a conqueror, is what Joe Rogan would call him. I think the greatest feat that he's done is the fact that he took that much time off and came back, and his first fight back competed against the very best in the division and made it look easy. So I think that he's one of the greatest ever. That being said, he's smart. He'll fight Stipe and retire. Because these new age heavyweights, these new age martial artists, they're just built different, and they are hungry.
Yeah.
He's been on top for a long time. He was smart to move to heavyweight because he didn't want to train as much as it takes to have the movement it does at light heavy. Heavyweight, the activity comes way down. And so, and I think that also the skill set actually at bigger guys comes down a little bit. So I think it was a smart move for him to move when he did. But, I like John Jones. I don't agree with everything he's done, but man, what a spectacle.
Well, I think when it comes to sports, you have to separate. I mean, I remember Charles Barkley saying, I'm a basketball player. I'm not here to raise your kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I get that. I mean, you do want to see good people be in those positions. That's why, I think so much of GSP, but I think with John, I always thought this, like even Connor fought so hard to like maybe he started off in 45 was his weight, like he could make that comfortably. But then when he ended up fighting at 70 at that time, he fought Diaz. It was like, man, that had to be a lot easier camp, bro. Because like not only are you having to work on your skill set, the ground game, stand-up game, everything else, but then you're trying to cut weight at the same time. It's like, what if you just didn't have to cut? Joe talks about this all the time, about just having, you can only lose a certain percentage of your body weight, and they're constantly weighing you. But yeah, John definitely moving up, and I knew he was going to destroy it. Like he would destroy anybody, I think. In that, I mean, I don't know. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think Francis could have given him some issues just because how big. I mean, Francis is just so big. He's a real heavyweight. He cuts to get to 265, and he is lean. And so I think that could have given him a little bit of an issue, but I just think John would have chained his wrestling too well together, and his movement would have been too good for him.
He's just too smart, bro. Like he wouldn't have fallen for the like. Ngannou's just so simple. Like it's a simple game plan. And
the thing is Ngannou's just one of the only guys that has that chance to just sleep him.
Yeah.
Not many people have a chance to just put him out and him not have a chance to recover. So I think Francis could have been an issue for him. I think he runs through Stipe. I think Tom Aspinall could be an issue just because of his size and age and athleticism. But even there, I think John just slows him down. I wouldn't be surprised we might see John fight one more time.
But do you think like every generation, it's like the stuff that Chuck and those guys, Tito, were doing, like they're so simple, like they wouldn't be top 20. They might not even be on the roster today.
Dude, not even close. I mean, if you watch BJ Penn when he first came out, they called him the prodigy.
Right.
Because of how fast he got his black belt in jiu-jitsu. His last fight, he got submitted in like 15 seconds.
Yeah, man.
Like
the level, bro.
It's evolved so much. If you look at the wave, it like basically started off with jiu-jitsu guys because no one knew jiu-jitsu, and then wrestlers learned jiu-jitsu, and so then wrestlers started dominating because they just take guys down, not get submitted, and punch on them. And then it went to a transition where strike kind of made a little bit of an appearance, only until people started learning how to get to wrestling. Wrestling's the most dominant sport for sure. But the thing is if you look now, the sport's been old enough. I've always said with a due time, it'll always be a striking art because
you start off standing up.
The way you win is damage inflicted. And so I can wrestle with you. And so if you guys don't understand the new rules have changed to the point where like I see a lot of people, they get upset when somebody wins a fight and maybe that guy got pushed up against the cage or was on his back for 2 or 3 minutes of a round. But if I'm starting off a fight, this first round, you come out, boom, I stick you in the face with a jab, bang, I hit you with a cross, bust your face up a little bit. Maybe it's only a minute. And then you shoot in on me. I defend, you push me in the cage, you hold me against the cage, I defend, I turn off, I'm defending, you take me down for the last maybe minute and a half, 2 minutes of the round, but you just hold me, you don't punch me. You didn't do any damage to me. There's 0 damage done. You grappled me. There was nothing done. Here's the problem, even crazy. A submission. You can get 95% into a submission and there's no damage done. If I get out, you get no points other than the fact that if I haven't damaged you, like if I don't hit you and you control me the whole round, yeah, you win. But if the first minute and a half or last minute and a half, I bust you up with a couple shots and I create damage, I technically win that round now because it's damage based. So if it's a damage based sport and the hardest aspect of it's wrestling, wrestling is the most exhausting aspect. Well, at first it was a payoff because these guys were good enough at wrestling to where they get the fight to the ground. Eventually they hold to the ground. They can ground and pound or submit. Cool. Well, if you start looking now what's happened, like look at Sugar Sean, look at Izzy. Yeah, Izzy got beat eventually, but Izzy didn't get beat with wrestling. Everybody thought he would eventually. He got beat with striking. The strikers have learned. The strikers have learned how to wrestle. The strikers have learned how to not get taken down. Or I should say, people have learned enough to where you've got to work really hard to get anything. And so what you're starting to see, you see this with like Yoel Romero, you see this with some of the best wrestlers in MMA. They don't wrestle. They use it to make sure they don't get taken down, and that's their extent of their wrestling.
That's Gaethje's big thing.
Yeah.
You never even see his wrestling because nobody even tries.
Because to wrestle, it's just unless you are really good at it, you are risking expending valuable energy on the chance of scoring 0 points, exhausting yourself, and then being right back where you started, where now you got to defend strikes and try to strike him. So
and more tired.
Yep. And so to me, I think the future of MMA, you're going to see the only time people wrestle are going to be off strikes. I think you're going to see a lot more striking while wrestling. I think a lot of people have added wrestling to their striking where they'll strike and then they'll shoot. I think the next wave of MMA is going to be people who are what a lot of people consider dirty boxing, like clinch ties, striking in the clinch, elbow ties, striking in them, striking from single legs, and just
what John did early on, and then he kind of got away from it.
Control people for a little, control people, get them moving, punch them. Once they get their ground, grab them, make them move. Once they start defending the takedown, punch them, and just play this scenario over. Like, to me, the perfect fight strategy is to put someone in the cage, walk them back to the cage, start throwing punches. The moment they block, shoot. Take them down. Put them on their butt, and then I let them stand up. And as they stand up, I punch them. And then the moment they stand up, I take them back down. And I do this because I don't really want to fight for a takedown. But if you're standing straight up blocking my punches, takedown's easy against the cage. I don't have to chase you. Pretty simple takedown. And then I don't want to fight to hold you down. That's an exhausting thing to do, to hold another man down. It's hard. It's a lot harder to get up, but it's hard. So once I take you down, I'd much rather just stand up. And now you can stand up too. The problem is while you're standing up, I'm going to punch you up until you get all the way up. And so I think that you're going to see that play out more in MMA, where people are controlling the body more and moving into strikes. But I think the sport still has a lot of growth. I think that it's crazy to say this, but if you watch boxing, if you watch K1 kickboxing, the jiu-jitsu and the wrestling in MMA have, I won't say they've caught up because they haven't. Like an MMA wrestler's not gonna like out wrestle a collegiate wrestler. Like everyone's like, oh, Khabib versus like Bo Nichols. Bo Nichols will destroy him in a wrestling match. An MMA fight might be different, but in a wrestling match, like there's just certain rules. Like that's Bo's game. But jiu-jitsu's kind of caught up. You've seen a lot of people kind of get to like, that are MMA fighters kind of get to like almost a world-class level in jiu-jitsu. It's still a big gap. Like people who are specifically jiu-jitsu only, like they're still better. Striking's the one aspect that I would say would be the hardest thing for an MMA fighter to, if you just took the collaboration of skill across the board and you took a pro-level MMA fighter and you took him into a high-level jiu-jitsu match, I think they would do okay. I think they lose, but I think they do okay. I think if you throw them into a wrestling match, I think they lose, but I think they do okay. I think they can kind of play. I think if you take that person, you throw them into a high-level striking match, they get destroyed. You know, like, I mean, Anderson Silva lost a boxing match to, he was one of the greatest strikers in MMA. He lost a boxing match to Jake Paul. Now, granted, it was older, and I'm not saying, you know, but
But when you take away, this is what I try to explain to people. I mean, I don't train and do things like you do, but I'm like just being a sports guy in general. I have an ability to kind of read sport and understand strategy and stuff a little bit different than just an average guy, right?
Yeah.
So I watch it and I see, like, there's certain things like just the way your stance is, because the threat of a takedown, the threat of a kick,
Yep.
and when you take all that away, then Anderson Silva loses a lot of the advantage that he had in the striking game, right? Because now all you got is, I tell people all the time, like, you got 2 weapons in boxing. Like, you got like 12 when you're doing, like, whenever you elbow, knee, takedown, like all the different things that you can do. So yeah, definitely. So we're gonna have to come back sometime, change the backdrop a little bit, and just actually have a UFC podcast. And
Dude, I'd love it. I know too much about him. There's an old saying about old guys that do martial arts that they used to say about my coach, and they say the guys forgot more martial arts than you might ever learn. That's probably me, and I just don't have a great memory. Been doing it for 30 years, and I've really been blessed to have been able to work and be around some of the greatest minds in martial arts, and piggyback off them and learn, and honestly, it's crazy to think about this. I'm 37 years old, and I still don't feel like I've ever become like I still don't feel like I've ever coached for real. Like, I don't feel like I've ever done it the way I know how. And I've taken some time off. I don't currently have an MMA team. I coach the kids. I don't currently have an MMA team, but I am about to launch one. And, I put a lot of work into consolidating different data on what things work best in MMA. And at the same time, collecting how to teach it, like studying, like how does Bill Belichick coach? Studying great coaches, and so I've put together a system over the last 6 months of the martial arts side that I've learned over the last 30 years, the implementation side I've learned from coaching over the last 15 years, and the subconscious programming side that I've just been obsessed with learning for the past 15 years. And I'm not one to say, I would just say that I'm excited to see some things come to fruition in the next chapter of my life as a coach. I think that I just really think that I'm at a point where a lot of hard work's gonna pay off soon, and it's gonna be a fun venture. But I'm looking to. I really think I'm about to kind of put a. I don't know. I'm not one to try to say what I'm going to do. I'd like to say that in a year we can come back on this podcast and I'll have some evidence as to my methods and what I've been going after. But I definitely have a big goal on the horizon, and I'm excited to kind of trek into it, if you will.
Good deal, man. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. Great conversation.
Sure.
Unfortunately, this is the second time we ran through this. I had some audio problems last time.
The first one was better.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
Well, no, we had a couple of clips we pulled out, but man, this one was great too. Got into some stuff that we didn't touch on last time that I thought really was good stuff. But appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely do it again, and I am really looking to have a few different type podcast layouts and stuff. So I think probably having a UFC conversation
be cool,
and to have just shoot the crap. I can be like what's his name, Ariel. I'm the guy that
Hawani?
don't really fight. I'm the guy that don't really fight.
Me too.
But I'll just I'll just be the guy that coordinates the conversations and ask the questions. But
Shoot, you get a new sign. I'm just gonna come over and hijack this awesome studio and start an MMA podcast. I'll just be your roommate.
yeah, okay. I'm running out of rooms. We didn't turn this one into this one. And Najee's taking over the other one, so
Well,
you have to snuggle up with him.
that's okay. He's a pretty cool guy.
Good deal. Well, guys, we appreciate you checking in with us, watch another episode. Just remember, always be yourself, unless you can be a bison. If you can be a bison, always be a bison. Till next time.